All right, Kevin, let's talk Christmas trees. When we talk about Christmas trees, what are the most popular types of trees that are used for Christmas trees?
Well, given the history of bringing in winter greens into our homes, as far as I understand, it's a Northern European practice, and so the tree species would be evergreen conifers, that spruce, fir, pine. What's interesting is that we get an attachment to the ones we grew up with. So that as a child outside of Kansas City, Scots pine, which is kind of a medium length piney needle tree, was what everyone had. Here in northern New England, in northern New Hampshire, let's say, balsam fir would be big. In northern Maine and down east, perhaps white cedar. So anyway, we get very strongly attached to particular varieties, and often they're the ones that we grew up with as kids. The reason that there is that variation is that these tree species are adapted to different types of climate, weather conditions, soil conditions. So the usual drivers for what tree grows well where is in play here. Also, Christmas trees are a very heavily managed crop. I mean, they are a horticultural crop, so it combines aspects of agriculture and also aspects of forestry. And so, although we think of Christmas trees pretty much just at this seasonal time of year, there's a lot of activity at Christmas tree farms, certainly from April through November, and perhaps even for a longer period than that.
Which ones smell the best?
Well, see, this is where, remember, I talked about childhood stuff. And so there is that aspect. I am particularly partial to balsam fir, which has that Christmassy smell. Though with fresh trees, it's always going to be good, no matter what species it is.
Gotcha. What about weather in trees? Has there been any extreme weather this season that has impacted the crop of trees?
Well, and this is where, when we're dealing with Christmas trees as a perennial crop, which means, of course, it takes more than 1 year to grow them, you will often see written as an average of it taking 6 to 7 years. As an average, that's probably right, but it can be 5 to a dozen years. So anyway, weather conditions during that whole period of time can be both favorable or less than favorable for growth, but also for the support of insect pests or fungal-borne diseases of trees that are also influenced by weather. So it's not so much of a simple one-to-one relationship with weather. Probably the biggest impact with weather that I'm aware of this year, the state of Oregon is a very large producer of Christmas trees, and the high temperatures and dry conditions adversely affected seedling establishment, and that will be a factor coming into play 5, 6, 8, 10 years from now.
Wow, you're forecasting Christmas trees. That's cool. I always see Christmas trees growing on the side of a mountain. Is that a thing, or is it just coincidence that I always see that?
Well, conifers, and thank you for that. And this is where the botany of these trees, which are all very, in a broad sense, in the pine family, they have adapted to particular niches. So some are good on mountainsides, some in valleys, some deal with wind exposure greater than others. So certainly the nostalgic ideal of going out into the woods and cutting your own trees on a wild patch of ground. There are state forests and national forests that support that with a permit. So for the adventuresome, that's something that can be checked out. Also, of course, I say, of course, people get their trees from like big box store discounters, and those are produced in very large operations, often in the West Coast or even into Canada. Most states do have Christmas tree production that would be local, and that can be a fun opportunity to take the family and do some Christmas tree hunting.
Cool. Is there a particular type of Christmas tree that is most resilient to a changing climate and all different types of weather?
Well, and this is where the both plant breeders and plant propagators, they're always trying new things. And this is where trying some varieties that are perhaps not native to the US, but some of the fir, some of the traditional Tannenbaum from Germany and Scandinavia are being planted here. Scots pine, the Christmas tree of my childhood, of course, is an introduced variety, introduced species. So it's not so much. This is the wonderful thing about botany and plant life, is that it's not the question of the best tree under all circumstances, but that there is some trees that are good for whatever specific circumstances you have to deal with.
So what about, okay, you've got it in your house, you brought it home. Any good tips to keep it? Because we're getting our trees early on now, it seems. People are getting them before Thanksgiving. Any tips for a long-lasting tree life once it's in your home?
And the first step with that is, indeed, that has been a real shift in the last 5 years or so, maybe 10 years, in Christmas tree. The management is that people are buying them earlier, and that can be a fine thing. What you do want the tree before you set it up, if you've got it home, is to have the base, keep the base submerged in water, the cut end in a bucket of water, and make sure that that stays wet. It's good if the tree is outside and not yet brought in, to keep it in the shade, and to and if possible in areas with low wind, so that the tree leaves, the needles are less likely to be desiccated. Once a tree is in the house, certainly keeping it damp, having the, if you're using electric lights, making sure they're in good repair. Good to have some distance from the ground, from the floor to the lowest branches. So those are our common sense tips to keep the tree going through the Christmas season.
I had a friend the other day that told me that when she was little, they used to get a Christmas tree that still had the roots intact so that you could plant them. You could plant it after Christmas. And she said her whole front yard, her dad's whole front yard, is filled with old Christmas trees now. Is that still a thing? Have you heard of this?
It is still a thing. There are some cautionary just things, considerations with that, is that a lot of these species that we would grow for Christmas trees, one of the reasons they are selected as good varieties for Christmas trees is how well they deal with shearing and mechanical pruning. And so the tree that is an excellent 10-foot tall or 8-foot tall Christmas tree in your living room may not be the best 20, 30, 40-foot tall tree in your front yard. So that is one consideration there. For a while in my childhood, we had a potted Norfolk Island pine, which is from the Southern Hemisphere, and that served us fine as a tree year-round in our dining room, and then would decorate it at Christmas time. So there are various options here. The Christmas trees as a crop have both these long-term economic dynamics of keeping the land in agricultural production, and so it's a great practice to be part of.
Any other way to repurpose it? Do you have any recommendations for repurposing that would be, no?
Well, some towns repurpose cut trees through mulching, and of course, you need to get the ornaments off. But there are communities that have set up Christmas tree collection programs, and then with the mulching, those mulch chips can be used for landscape purposes after use. So that is a way of extending the life of them, in the service life of them. And the way I think to look at Christmas trees is that for most of us, they are an agricultural or horticultural product, and that it's a way it is a way that enables land to be kept in agricultural production and kept open and providing value to the landowners and to the community.
All right, last question, Kevin. Do you have your Christmas tree yet? And if so, what is it?
Where I am at with this is that I enjoy the trees that are up and down my local community, out of doors. The town does a good job with lighting them. And that's what my wife and I in our small house, that's what we do. The engagement is really what our older culture of bringing these greens from the winter into our homes to remind us that life is continuing and the promise of the future spring.